Today we'll take a look at the best MacBook ever. While a complete redesign this might not be, we are looking at one of the most powerful Macs and certainly the most powerful MacBook currently on offer. If you wanted a more powerful Mac than this, then as of filming, this is second only to the M1 Ultra Mac Studio. But if you're up for a portable computer, I personally find it a bit easier to pack the MacBook instead of a Mac Studio. This 15mm thick slab of aluminium packs an M2 Max with a 12-core CPU, an insane 38-core GPU, and 64GB of RAM. Although if you wanted to, you can actually spec this up to 96GB of RAM. That is an absurd amount of RAM to have in a laptop, but what that means is, if workload gets intense on this, there's no need to hold back because you've got to take it easy. It's just a laptop. You can straight up hand it to this and it's gonna be moving things along without even appearing to break a sweat. It's a bit easier to understand how well this performs if there's something to reference it against. Enter my previous MacBook, the 16-inch M1 Pro, which is still an amazingly capable machine and I love it to bits, but it is my previous MacBook because it's just really difficult to say no to more power, especially when it arrives in the form of an M2 Max. Take exporting one of my recent videos covering DaVinci Resolve on iPad, for instance. It's a fully color-graded 4K timeline with source footage being mainly long GOP H.264 clips, so not exactly an easy codec to work with. The M2 Max finished the export a whole 2 minutes ahead of my M1 Pro, which was already exporting faster than real time, crunching out the 8-minute video in a very respectable 6 minutes. Moving on to do a noise removal pass on a 30-second 4K clip in Resolve Studio, the M2 Max exported twice as quickly as the M1 Pro, thanks to its immensely powerful GPU. But it's really quite a bit more than just render times. Take processors like stabilizing shaky footage or running a subject tracker in FCP, for instance. These are common yet resource-intensive tasks. It's really impressive how the M2 Max makes even quicker work of these compared to my already amazing M1 Pro. If you ever think getting an M2 Max is overkill, as in your average tasks won't necessarily push the M2 Max to its limits, then the way everything is snappier in general would still be something you'd happily enjoy. And speaking for creators who have to do tons of video editing, this has perfectly adequate power to serve as a primary machine. It's practically pro desktop performance in a notebook. And that exact thought actually prompted me to take a short trip down memory lane. This is my 27-inch iMac from 2019. It's the one with an Intel i9 and Vega 48 GPU. It's also got 64GB of RAM, and when this first came out, its performance was considered to be godly, because back then it outperformed even the iMac Pro. And today we're here to see it get smoked by a MacBook. Same render test in FCP as before, 4 minutes for the M2 Max, and close to 10 minutes for the i9. The M2 Max also took considerably less time to analyze a clip for stabilization, and when it came to subject tracking, the i9 took twice as long as the M2 Max. The denoise test, however, in Resolve Studio was what I was most curious to compare, because that Vega 48 in the iMac is quite a powerful discrete GPU, and this process is extremely GPU intensive. Rendering a pass was much faster on the M2 Max MacBook, and when it came to playing back a preview from the 24p timeline, the 27-inch iMac was dropping some frames, averaging 20 to 21 FPS, while incredibly, the M2 Max managed to play back in real time. That's how far we've come. One more thing about these new MacBooks is the internal SSDs are so ludicrously fast, the speed tests are impressive enough to be a party trick by themselves. I mean, just look at this. But being the most powerful is merely one of the things that makes this the best MacBook. The speakers, for instance, are still the best I have ever heard on any laptop. How many laptops can you play music on and actually enjoy the quality coming out of the inbuilt speakers? The display, again, the best ever, 1600 nits HDR, P3, 120Hz ProMotion. You can sell just this screen for the price of the entire laptop, and it would actually sound reasonable if you look up the price of similarly spec'd HDR displays. But thanks to that, I can create HDR content like this very video using a setup that is just this laptop. Also, despite all the heavy lifting I've done on this laptop, it still runs cool enough to not burn my lap when I literally use it as a laptop. In fact, you forget there's even a pair of fans in here because you'll likely never hear them. This thing runs dead silent. Seriously good riddance to the days when performance laptops sounded like hairdryers. The size of the battery in this is the exact same as the previous generation of 16-inch MacBooks, but the battery life of this generation is 1 whole hour better than the previous gen. All that extra battery life is credited solely to the more efficient processors in here. The battery life of this is so good for a laptop, it does not feel believable. I brought it with me on a 4-day overseas trip, and on that trip I used it for light tasks like web browsing, replying emails, and just before I boarded my flight home, I still had 84% battery left. I could have just went on that entire trip without even packing my charger. A few days after I got back, I had to edit some photos in Capture One. I was working on it continuously for about 3 to 4 hours, and in the next few days, I edited 2 short reels on it, recorded a voiceover, and pretty much an entire week later, 11% left after doing all that on a single charge. You can imagine if you get this MacBook Pro as a secondary machine, it's unsurprising if you only have to charge it once every few weeks. If it's your primary and you're doing intensive work on it, a full day is still no problem. I always find myself running out of juice before my MacBook does. And when the time does eventually come to charge, it's also a very satisfying process because your MagSafe cables are perfectly color matched to the color of your MacBook. It also charges surprisingly fast, like within the hour fast. You literally charge it for just a moment, use it for days or weeks, then charge it for moments again, rinse and repeat. Even though this new generation of MacBook Pros look exactly the same as the ones that came before, it would be unfair to say that there's no improvement in terms of hardware, because there are some under-the-hood upgrades like the HDMI port now supporting 240Hz at 4K or 8K up to 60Hz. It now sports Bluetooth 5.3 up from 5.0 on the previous gen, and it now has Wi-Fi 6E. For the power users, these are significant improvements despite the fact that they might not be the most visible upgrades. But with this hardware design, it's difficult to deny how Apple has struck the perfect balance between function and form on a Pro laptop. For creative professionals, I genuinely cannot think of a more perfect and reliable laptop. From performance to battery life, the amazing display and speakers, the inaudibly quiet cooling fans. At this point in time, this is quite simply the best.